Thank you so much for hosting me such a fantastic event with an outstanding audience. So it's really a pleasure to talk in these crazy times and talking from Brazil. It's just a pleasure to share a bit of our vision on how construction will look in a very close future. So basically, to start, I will address basically the context, and I'm gonna use some old data from 15 that was pretty famous, that was shared by McKinsey. But before that, I want to make sure that everybody gets. We think that building should be much simpler than it is nowadays. It's a huge industry. It's a $13 trillion industry in the world. And the way people build and the way people manage the construction journey, we deeply believe there's many opportunities to improve that. So basically, the standard on the industry is that we always delay projects, that we always miss times, that we always miss the cost baseline. And we think that's in the past and that we should move forward. But our experience came from the automobilistic industry, where I've worked before. So I've had my family have a business with Volkswagen in Latin America. So I had a unique opportunity of being professionally born within the Volkswagen industry, the way German people think, the way cars and trucks are developed and manufactured. So that's where my professional mind was born. And then I've used some of that to start Ambar in 13 with the vision of really transforming construction as close as possible to an industry, to an assembly line. So, but then some data came on after we started, because when we started, there wasn't much of a name for what we were doing that people now call Construtech. But when we started, it was really starting days of this. And then in 15, McKinsey released a very nice study going across the challenges of the construction industry and how big of an opportunity it was to face some of the key challenges the industry had to make the industry evolve. And then I've chosen two major graphics that brought my attention heavily, and that's basically where our strategy is today. And then on the left-hand side, you have basically a comparison of the industry, manufacturing, economy, and construction industry productivity across 20 years. So it's pretty clear that productivity was not going well on that time zone, and it is not going well even today. There's a lot of improvement since then, but we see a lot of opportunities still. And then on the right-hand side, we have how digital it is, the industry, right? And construction, it was only better than fishing and hunting and agriculture. And that picture also changed a little bit, but it's still early days, in my opinion. So for us, construction is really simple. It's really a combination of software and hardware. And then we're gonna deploy some of our vision. What is the hardware view? What do we see as hardware, and what do we see as software? So basically, hardware for us is really the physical aspect of the building. So those things that you shouldn't be working with raw materials, you should be working with parts, components. So that's our approach on the hardware piece. And then software for us is really connecting the journey. It's making sure that there is a continuous flow beginning on the design and ending on the post-construction. So that's basically how we approach the construction industry. So basically, hardware for us is really construction sites becoming assembly lines. That's how we see hardware, and it's really simple to understand. I mean, when you look to the left-hand side, it's The construction cost is a combination of raw material, manufacturing, and overhead, the traditional way. And we believe there's another way where instead of raw materials, you're gonna have parts. Instead of manufacturing, which we call on a very elegant way, the way people do things on the construction site, transforming raw materials, we call this manufacturing, but actually it's transformation without much of science behind. So we think we should combine all that and turn as much as possible raw material into parts off-site, of course, and then you're gonna have on the construction sites a new equation, which is more parts than raw materials, but much less labor. Then you're gonna have only assembly, not transformation, and a much lower overhead because it's a much easier process to be managed than managing the cost of throwing a lot of more raw materials, specialized subcontractors. So that's how we see hardware on the construction. And that could be a component that's ready to be assembled, could be a prefabrication of specific parts, M&P for instance, or it could be a wall, or it could be a complete model. So that's how we see construction as a hardware. And software for us is really, when you look to the journey, when you build, you start with the design, right? You start with a project that you're gonna design, and then you go to buy everything that you have to buy. You have to do, of course, design and budgeting, planning and buying, which is supply, and then assembling, which is really running the construction sites. And that value chain goes through different actors. So you're gonna have a general contractor, you're gonna have subcontractors, you're gonna have suppliers, you're gonna have architect, you're gonna have project teams. So basically, we see that those people, they don't talk the same language. The information starts all over and over again through the value chain. So we think there's a huge opportunity to have a continuous flow, and that's where we see software playing a big role. But software upon a very organized value chain. So that's basically our view of hardware and software. So that's how we see that construction is a combination of hardware and software. I'm gonna give just a real quick context of our footprint nowadays as a company. So we are in Brazil, based at the headquarters in Brazil, in Sao Paulo. We've been a part of more than 300,000 units between apartments and homes that were built in the last 7 years in Brazil. We have nowadays 1,100, almost 1.2 thousand construction sites that are using our technologies in Brazil today, as well as 3 in the United States, especially in Florida. So we are starting to operate in US this year, in Florida, really to learn and see how we can deploy all those technologies that we've been developing in the market. Then when you go to the industrialization, which is, we call hardware, but what actually hardware is delivered is a capability of really transforming the construction site into an assembly line. So we call this our portfolio for industrialization. And that's basically, we have 3 major offers. We have one which is component, where we create innovative components that are really, they were built to be assembled and not to be transformed or to be manufactured or to be changed on the construction site. They were all thought and developed to be assembled. We can then move forward and have a prefab, which is a combination of components, and then you're gonna offsite part of the construction site, which is basically, let's get MMPs, electric, mechanical, plumbing. You can turn all those things into components. You can turn all those things into pieces. And then we also have our offer, which is the modular one, which is delivering walls ready to be assembled with all the MMPs included and all that. So really transforming that into a construction site. But transforming construction sites into assembly lines is much beyond components, is much beyond prefab, is much beyond modular, because you have to face the reality on the construction side. And reality in construction side, there's 2 additional components beyond the product that you're gonna deliver Either it's a wall, either it's a prefab component, either it's a component. You're going to have logistics into the construction site, and you're also going to have the subcontractors who will be the people who will assemble the components in the construction sites. Those things will not be assembled itself or by robotics. So you need people there, and you also need people to manage logistics. So everything that we do on the industrialization, we combine products with a logistic methodology. So we implement logistics centers, little logistics centers in the construction sites, and we break the construction site into phases like an assembly line. So you're gonna have foundation, wall after wall, and finishing, and then we're gonna deliver all the components, prefab or modular, into those phases. We're gonna organize logistics into those phases, and we're gonna have teams per phases. So we're gonna apply really the construction line approach to the whole thing, not only product, but also logistics and how you assemble. And then I'm gonna share some pictures of, so that's basically some of the products. That's a prefab product assembled. That's a construction site that is being run with concrete walls. So basically you can assemble all the MMPs on those steel nets, and then you're gonna have a form, aluminum form, and then you're gonna pour concrete on that, and then you're gonna have, after that, 12 hours later, you're gonna have all the walls ready with MMPs installed. So you don't need any additional labor to do that. That's another picture, so showing that we can do that for plumbing, for foundation, for wall. So that's a phase for walls, and that's a phase for foundation. And that's a picture of, on the left-hand side, it's a logistics center on a construction site, because if you want to transform construction, you're gonna have to face construction sites. You're gonna have to face that. If the change that you are doing is real, you're gonna have to change construction sites. They have to evolve as well, because that's where reality is. So we make sure that we also implement all the logistic methodology, the simple ones like Kanban, just in time, sequencing the construction site like an assembly line, organizing all the components per step of the construction phase. And then on the right-hand side, you have a subcontractor team, a guy, and we use colors because, I mean, you have all the naming, and people sometimes don't read on construction sites. So you're gonna have, we use a lot of color coding, so we have teams that are organized per color as well. The point here is that if you want to change construction industry, you're gonna have to change construction sites. So we make the change on construction sites, of course, empowered by technology, using a lot of technology, but we make the change happen on each construction site that we are in. And we deploy that knowledge to those guys. So basically that's it. We deliver all those hardwares through we have 3 customer centers in Brazil that we call, where we do all those models, prefabrications and all that, and we deliver that to construction sites. And then we have a customer success team that makes sure that our clients and construction site are capable of using all the logistic and the assembly methodology that we deliver. So that's basically how we approach industrialization, and that's our view for, that's a deep view for hardware in our opinion. Then moving forward, and that's digitalization, and that's where software plays a role. So we believe deeply that the journey of construction, beginning with design, should be a continuous flow, and that there is major challenges for that to happen, and we think we are working to address that. So for us, our offer for general contractors, for subcontractors is basically, we have three offers. One is we have the BIM offer, which we basically offer virtual design construction, where we put all the projects together. I mean, there's huge barriers for people for construction companies, for general contractors, for developers to implement BIM. There's high investments on hardware, there's hard investments on training, there's hard investments on software, and it takes a time for you to capture the value. There's no doubt you will, but on a very fragmented industry, people don't invest that much upfront on technology. So what we've developed was, I mean, BIM for us is what internet is for commerce. BIM is for the construction industry. We deeply believe BIM is the foundation, behind the way and the speed that we're going to be able to evolve the industry. BIM is a direct relation to that. And I always like to talk about BIM and compare to what happened in the automobilistic industry. We also, of course, cars were, one day they were made on 2D as well. They were all made on AutoCAD. And before that, they were made on paper. They were drawn paper and then components. And then you were drawing components on paper, and then you have to do build of material per estimative and then by hand. And then you've moved that in the 80s to the AutoCAD. Then you were doing the same thing, but on the computer. So you have a better file information, but you didn't have drawings with information. I mean, you have only 2D information like area. You didn't have the volume. You didn't have build of material related to the drawings. So, and then on the 90s, the industry started, the automobilistic industry started to use the CATIA, which is the BIM for automobilistic. So that was the first time where 3D came into play for the automobilistic industry, but not only 3D, because some people think BIM is 3D. It's not 3D, right? It's where CATIA came to the auto industry in the 90s was the capability of, by doing a design on a 3D, you have a connected build of material. So you know exactly the materials that you're going to use to build that model, to build that component, to build that part. And that was key for the industry to evolve. And that's how I see BIM as well for 30 years later. But BIM is the capability that you have to connect on the design the rest of the flow. So if you do that well, you're going to be able to procure well, you're going to be able to manage your construction site according to the design. You're going to have a real knowledge flow. You're going to have a flow that is starting well. So what we did as an offer for that was, instead of trying to convince companies to invest heavily on BIM, we've created an own team. We have 30 people working with BIM in the company now. And then we offer for the companies, if they are doing 2D still, we convert them into 3D and into BIM by putting all the projects together and doing the virtual design construction. So we basically, with very low investments, you are able to do on a project base per unit a conversion to BIM. And once you do that, then you are able to do a much better flow. Then you are able to come and know exactly all your build of materials for that construction site. And then you use that to procure well. And then on the supply phase, which is CONAS, the product that we have, what we did, procuring procuring construction materials is very hard because suppliers specify different namings. So one guy will quote you a name, we'll call this a tube, the other one will call this a pipe. So it's very hard to compare different suppliers. So it's very hard to quote, and it's very hard to do the procurement for construction materials. So what we have developed in the company was this huge technology. It is small, but it's huge in the power that it has, that we come from the design, and then basically we make everybody talk the same language. We push forward the information of everything that we're gonna buy, and we make sure that everybody quotes the same information. So basically we harmonize the language that all the suppliers will talk, so we are able to compare everybody. So that's basically what we did here, and then we turned that into a platform, like a marketplace, where the general contractor will come from the design, will put all the demand there specified in the platform, and people will come and quote, and then you have really a comparison. And the improvements that you have here, especially in Brazil, that, I mean, we are delivering on an average 11% savings on construction materials by only doing this, empowering comparisons, and also, of course, by doing so, we are able to enhance more your supplier network. So we are, because we know exactly what you're gonna buy, so we are able to enhance that a little bit, and then we are able to improve a lot the performance of the supply. But not only that, remember, that's connected to the design. So once you have the design, you have all the things that are gonna, because we turn designs, once we do the virtual design construction, we are able to tell you all the orders that you're gonna have to follow to build that model. And each order is it's an assembly order and it's a material order. The material order we use to buy in the platform, in the CONAS, and the service order we use to plan the construction site and to connect that to a subcontractor. So that's basically what we did on the supply. And then when you go to the construction site, you have EVA, which is everything available. We have a product there as well, that basically once you have all the orders connected to the design, we basically put by specialized. So we have finishing, MMPs, structural work. So we aggregate all the orders per knowledge, and then we relate a subcontractor to that, and then we plan the construction site, and all those orders will go on a mobile basis, on a daily basis, to the subcontractor so they can perform the activity. They have all the information they need there, so they know exactly where they have to do the activity, what activity they have to do, and they do what we call the self-check. So basically, we've put together here design, supply, and assembly. When you go to assembly, you have planning, checking, and quality together in one flow. So you need basically no overhead to manage construction site. Basically, you give subcontractors the power, because they know exactly what they have to do, where they have to do, they check, they know all the checks they have to do. And then on the first phase, you're gonna have a quality team. And that's something that has happened as well in the automobilistic industry. The first thing that people did when Ford became with the assembly lines they were putting quality check points, where in the end of the assembly lines, you're gonna have all the white people, white collar, using white shirts, white collar shirts. They were doing the quality checks, and then you know how things were going, and that's where we are in the construction industry. But when Toyota came on, they brought a new way of thinking, which is people are checking themselves. So once you do the activity, you are able to release the quality of that activity. And that goes with the time. And that's what we believe will happen as well in the construction industry. After we have a subcontractor that has 99% approval on a very broad base, you don't need to check them anymore. They are, you can trust them already. So we think that will happen as well. And when that happens, then the overhead will disappear. Basically, you need no overhead in the construction sites. Construction sites will be self-managed by subcontractors, which basically care. They know, specialized, they have the knowledge to perform that specific activity. So that's basically our view for digitalization, how we believe, what are the key things to transform the journey into a continuous flow, beginning with BIM. With BIM, you comes with the orders. So all the orders you have to perform to build that building. That order, each order is a material and a labor. Material you use to supply, labor you're gonna use to organize that closed flow with EVA in the construction site. So that's basically how we see this connecting the dots and making sure that construction is a continuous flow empowered by software. Some pictures of some works we've done. That's a supply, basically comparisons. You have all the data. You are able to access as well how much construction materials are worth for a company your size in that specific region. So we have all the data available for general contractors and subcontractors. And that's a view as well of construction site. And here in the middle, you're gonna have a very simple dashboard where you're gonna have major activities and all the buildings you have to do. And then you're gonna have a very simple view of, well, that activity in that building was done by the subcontractor, is approved by him, but my quality team was not there yet. And when they went, they approve it or they ask it for a rework, let's say. So you have a very continuous flow on the construction site, which empowers as well our vision of having an assembly line for construction. So I've used half an hour to explore some of my visions, but I'm more than happy to take questions, Q&As, ideas. doubts, insights, happy to answer.